Lonny is a lifelong resident of the Tri-State area. He has been married for 17 years to his friend and companion, Nick. A couple of two wonderful boys named Eli, who is 16 years old, and Cooper, who will forever be 12. Lonny and Nick recently became bereaved parents with cancer patients. Lonny Howard is a St. Jude Children's Research Hospital volunteer and editor. He has returned to his career as a PE teacher at Evansville Christian School. With a father's journey after losing his son, a warm welcome to Lonny Chapman.
Thank you, sir. Well, hello. Thank you for having me today. As you heard, I am a proud, proud husband of my wife, Nikki. I'm a proud, proud father of two wonderful boys, Eli, who is 16, a sophomore at Evansville Christian School, and Cooper, who is forever 12, unfortunately, that we lost 749 days ago. When asked to present, when asked to speak at this engagement, I could have gone several different ways. I could have gone how wonderful God was to us through Cooper's journey. I could have gone how wonderful St. Jude Children's Research Hospital treated us and the entire family. I could have gone how difficult it was on a marriage that started off and stayed strong. But today we're going to talk about grief. Grief is something that we will all experience in our lives at some point or another. Unfortunately, that's how it works. God did not intend it that way. God created the perfect world. Unfortunately, sin came into the world, and so we will all experience grief at some point in our lives. In 1969, there's a psychologist that kind of defined originally the stages of death as she was studying people with terminally ill cancer, ironically, and those kind of turned into the stages of grief. Now, our story's a little different. Those stages, as you think of stages are almost like stairs, like stages of life. There's the toddler stage. There's the now tween stage that we all kind of don't want to be around. There's the teen stage. There's the young adult stage. There's the adult stage. And there's the older retirement stage. Now, in that situation, those stages, once you're a toddler and you become a tween, you're no longer a toddler, nor will you ever be. Once you're a teen, you become a teen or a young adult. Once you're a young adult, you will never be a teen again. So when you think of the word stage, you think of something that you are and then you leave behind. And that's how the stages of grief have always been implemented. The stages of grief to me is not that simple. To me, stages of grief is more fluid. Once you move on from a stage, it's very possible to go back to it. Originally, there were 5 stages of grief. The first one's denial. There's no way this is happening. This can't happen to me. This can't happen to our family. The second one is anger. Angry at the fact that it is happening. Very angry at that fact. And we did go through those processes. We went through those processes when my son Cooper was diagnosed in 2018. We went through the denial phase, and I call them phases, not stages. We went through the denial phase where there's no way this could happen. But then we accepted it. And for many years, because Cooper's treatment was 3 years long, went through the anger phase of, why my child? Why him? And through that process, it was kind of ebb and flow. There were times we were fine, and there were times we were not. There were times where the journey was joyous, and then there were times that it was not. And with that, we can recognize that God was always at hand in our journey. We had a community of believers that supported us, prayed for us, and were with us through the entire journey. At St. Jude, they made it wonderful to be there. As Cooper would have described it, and as he did describe it, it was better than Disney World. He loved that place. So the grief stages or phases kind of ebb and flowed. There were times where it was difficult. There were times where it wasn't as difficult. And with grief, it's funny, not in a good way, because it hits you in waves. And I've heard several people describe it that way. If you've ever been to the ocean, you see the wave coming in. You can anticipate what's happening. It hits you, and you're still knocked back. And there's nothing you can do about it. Then there's times where you may not see the wave, and it hits you out of what appears to be nowhere. But with that, God was always with us, placing people in our lives at certain times, at certain places. And grief is it's a hard thing to put your mind around unless you've been through it. With the 5 stages, like say we have the we have the stage of denial. We have the stage of anger. We have this stage of bargaining. And bargaining is, what if I did this? Or what if I would do this? Or how can I change this? Then we have the stage of depression, where it really sinks in. And then finally, the stage of acceptance. Like I said, in my experience, not a professional, but in my experience of living through this, is each phase can happen all at once. Each phase can happen randomly. After 749 days, I still get angry. I'm supposed to be past that stage, according to psychology. After 749 days, my depression's still there because I don't have my son. And there are days where it's heightened, and there are days where it's not as out there. I have a couple of examples of kind of visuals of what grief might seem like. If this ball represents grief, and these boxes represent your life, this ball does not fit very well in your life. And that's what it was like for about 3 years of our life and after Cooper died. Grief was overflowing. And sometimes it came out as anger, sometimes depression, sometimes denial. Sometimes I accepted it. Sometimes I tried to bargain. Cooper's last day was my bargaining day. I begged God to give me his cancer. I begged him to save Cooper. Knowing that's not how God works, but I still tried to bargain. Now, as life goes on, if you notice, the grief, it does not get smaller, but life moves on a little bit, and you're able to subdue it a little. The grief is still the same size. And when it hits a wall, it's still there, and we don't know what's coming out. Or is anger coming out? Is the depression? Is the acceptance? Is just hearing Cooper's name, a song, a smell? What's going to trigger that? It could be nothing. Last week I was mowing my yard and having a great day, had a great day at school. It was sunny, mowing my yard, and I lost it. Why? I should be past that stage according to psychology. I should be in the acceptance stage. But I don't believe that's how it works. I don't believe there are stages that you just pass and you don't go back to. So we've described grief. And in this talk, we're looking at grief from the father's perspective. So we've described grief in the 5 phases that they've presented us. Now, what about a father? What is a father? A father should be a leader. A father should be a protector. A father should be the spiritual leader of the household. A father should be an example to those in his household and those around him. Through the situation with Cooper and during his treatment, I couldn't protect him. One of the major things a father's supposed to do is protect their child. And I could not do that. That was out of my hands. And I still wrestle with that. I still struggle with that. I lost my son that I could not save. And as part of the grief process, that is detrimental. That always takes me back to the anger and the bargaining. I'm not quite to the acceptance part. I can't accept I was not able to save him. However, at Cooper's celebration, a friend of a friend came up to me and just politely put his arm around me and said, "You did ultimately save him. You taught him to love and know Jesus, and that's the only thing a father should be doing. That is the most important thing." And the fact that Cooper knew Jesus and knew who he was helped subdue some of that anger, helped subdue some of that bargaining, and kind of tiptoe into the acceptance stage. And that's helpful. But that grief keeps creeping back. That grief keeps coming back. And a year after Cooper died, my oldest son, Eli, God love him, he had to deal with me after that. My oldest son, Eli, had his first real relationship. And as we know, those first relationships end, usually. And after that relationship ended, we were okay, and then he said, "It's okay, Dad. I'm used to losing people." And that brought so much anger and bargaining, all those phases back as a whole, because I could not save Cooper from his hurt, from his anguish, and now I cannot save Eli from his hurt and his anguish. They do not compare, but as a father, our innate being, we want to protect our child. We want to protect our family. And I failed twice with both of my boys. And that spun me into what's labeled as CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress syndrome. And for a weekend, I was out. I couldn't do anything. And by working through that, I'd learned that through Cooper's process, those 3 years, as the father, I didn't cry. Everyone else cried, but I didn't. Because I was there, I was supposed to be there, I was supposed to lift everyone up. And that's what I tried to do. But for 3 years, all that was suppressed, and it just came out over a teenage relationship with my son. Because it brought all that back, that ultimately all I want to do is protect my kids, protect my family, and I could not do it. So the grief from a father's perspective is tough, because as the protector, we're supposed to do that. But we can't. And that's tough to hear. We can't protect our kids. We can try. We can give them the best schooling. We can send them here. We can try to help them navigate through relationships. We can help them driving. We can help them do this. But once they're out, we cannot protect them. In this world, we cannot protect our kids. The only protection and the best thing we can do is introduce them to Jesus. That is the ultimate protection. And I heard that at Cooper's celebration, but Cooper also told me that before he died, the week before he died. We were listening to a song, and it's a Rascal Flatts song. It's I Will Be There, and it goes through so many verses, so many scripture verses, and it talks about how this person, I think it was written for this person and a love interest, and how he's always going to be there, always going to be there, pick him up and just be there. And I said, Cooper, this reminds me like how I feel about you. No matter what, I'm going to be there to pick you up. I'm going to be there to help you. And he said, no, Dad, that's Jesus. Jesus is going to be there to pick us up. Jesus is going to be there to help us. Not knowing a week later he would die. But that's the last song that we spoke about and we dissected. And through my son, my faith has increased. Through the community of believers, my faith has increased. And does that help my grief? It certainly does. But it doesn't mean that ball doesn't hit walls all the time. Sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes a couple times a week. The grief is always there, and it always will be. But as a father, one, we've been taught to suppress it. Two, we've been taught to help others through it. There's a psychologist, I forget his name. He said, be the only person not to cry at your dad's funeral. You're supposed to be the person to help everyone else through that. And that's been the mentality for many years. As the male, you're supposed to shoulder and brunt all of this. Suppress your feelings and help others. I totally disagree. I think it's okay to cry. Said it. I'm a dude. I think it's okay to cry. And I'm okay with it. And I cry. And I get mad. I get sad. But it helps me realize who I am. And who I am not just in me and my family, but who I am in Christ. So I think in society, especially Western society, we need to take a look at who we are and our identity and where we receive our strengths from. It's not from society and those around us necessarily. It's from Jesus. Thank you.